Imagine a single city, a settlement of muddy huts on 7 hills overlooking a river in central Italy. Now imagine that same city over centuries, stretching its grasp to rule from the rainy highlands of Scotland to the scorching deserts of Syria, from the Atlantic waves of Portugal to the shores of the Black Sea. This was not just a kingdom, it was a civilization, a concept, an empire that defined an era and whose shadow still falls long upon our world today. This is the story of the Roman Empire. Our story doesn't begin with an empire, but with a republic. For nearly 500 years, Rome was a republic, governed by elected senators, a complex system of checks and balances, and a fierce belief in civic duty. It was this republic, with its relentless, disciplined legions, that conquered the Mediterranean world. But with greatness came internal strife, ambition, and civil war. The final century before Christ was a time of chaos, as titanic figures like Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar clashed, their personal armies loyal to a man, not to the state. The republic, strained by its own success, was cracking, and from those cracks an empire would rise. The turning point came after the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC. In the power vacuum that followed, his great-nephew and adopted heir, a young man named Octavian, outmaneuvered all his rivals, including the famed Mark Antony and Cleopatra. By 27 BC, the wars were over. The Senate, grateful for peace, granted Octavian the title Augustus, the revered one. He was the first citizen, not a king, but in reality, he held all the power. The Republic was gone. In its place stood the Roman Empire, with Augustus as its first emperor, setting a template of rule that would last for centuries. And what an empire it was! At its peak under Emperor Trajan in the 2nd century AD, it was a staggering mosaic of over 60 million people, spanning 3 continents. It was held together by 2 mighty pillars, the road and the legion. A vast network of stone-paved highways, over 250,000 miles of them, connected the provinces. These roads allowed the legions, the most professional fighting force the ancient world had ever seen, to march swiftly to any trouble spot. But they also carried ideas, goods, and culture. A letter could travel from Egypt to Britain in a matter of weeks. Olive oil from Spain, wine from Gaul, spices from the East, and grain from Egypt all flowed towards the beating heart of the empire, the city of Rome itself, a bustling metropolis of over 1 million souls. To keep that heart content, the emperors provided panem et circenses, bread and circuses. The state doled out free grain, and the populace was entertained by the breathtaking, brutal spectacle of the gladiatorial games in the Colosseum, a monument to both Roman engineering and Roman thirst for order and drama. Beyond the spectacle, the Romans were master builders and administrators. They gave their world a common framework, Roman law, which emphasized evidence and procedure. Roman engineering, with its aqueducts, bridges, and public baths, and the Latin language. While the legions secured the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a period of unprecedented stability that lasted over 200 years, it was this infrastructure of daily life that truly Romanized the provinces. A local elite in France or Turkey would speak Latin, wear a toga, build a villa with a Roman bath, and participate in the vast, interconnected economy. They became Roman, not by blood, but by culture and citizenship, a privilege gradually extended until in 212 AD, Emperor Caracalla granted it to almost every free person in the empire. Yet, for all its glory, the empire carried the seeds of its own transformation. It grew too large to manage from one center. The 3rd century AD was a nightmare of crisis, with dozens of emperors rising and falling in quick succession, assassinated by their own troops, while barbarian tribes hammered at the frontiers and the economy faltered.
The solution came from Emperor Diocletian. He split the empire into eastern and western halves for easier administration. It was a pragmatic move, but a fateful one. The final act belongs to the West. While the Eastern Roman Empire, richer and more urbanized, would endure for another 1,000 years from its magnificent capital, Constantinople, the West slowly crumbled under relentless pressure. Germanic tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals, themselves often pushed by the terrifying advance of the Huns from the east, poured across the poorly defended frontiers. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoths. The symbolic blow was seismic. Finally, in 476 AD, a Germanic general named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus. No emperor would ever rule from Rome again. The empire in the West was finished. But here is the crucial truth. Rome did not simply fall, it transformed. Its physical political structure in Western Europe dissolved into a patchwork of Germanic kingdoms, but its ghost never left. The Latin language evolved into the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian. Roman law became the foundation for the legal systems of Europe. The Christian Church, which Rome had once persecuted but later adopted as its state religion, preserved Roman administration, Latin learning, and the very idea of a universal order. When Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day, 800 AD, he was trying to resurrect the ghost of Rome. For centuries, kings and popes, revolutionaries and architects have looked back to Rome as a model of power, law, engineering, and art. So, when we ask why the Roman Empire still captivates us, the answer is clear. We are in many ways still living in their world. We drive on roads laid over their roads. We live in republics that studied their constitution. We argue about laws based on their principles. We gaze at ruins that whisper of a scale and ambition that still takes our breath away. The Roman Empire is not a chapter in a history book. It is the foundation stone of the Western world.